The most unhinged guests Johnny Carson ever had. America's most polished talk show host, the man who could charm anyone, literally watching his guest compare muscle pumps to orgasms on live television. His face? Pure horror. And that was just the beginning of the chaos. For 3 decades, Johnny Carson ruled late-night television with an iron fist wrapped in velvet. He was the master of composure, the king of cool, the guy who could make presidents comfortable and turn nervous nobodies into stars with just one appearance on his couch. But here's what made Carson's reign truly legendary. Every once in a while, someone would walk onto that stage who absolutely refused to play by the rules. And when that happened, pure, unfiltered television gold. We're talking about an era before social media meltdowns, before publicists controlled every word, before celebrities were media-trained within an inch of their lives. Back then, when someone came on The Tonight Show, anything could happen, and I mean anything. Today, we're diving deep into the most outrageous, shocking, and downright insane moments when celebrities completely lost it on Carson's stage. These aren't just awkward interviews or uncomfortable moments. These are full-blown train wrecks that left even the unshakable Johnny Carson scrambling to maintain control. From shocking sexual confessions that made censors panic, to physical altercations that destroyed expensive sets, to drunken disasters that forced producers to cut segments short, these guests pushed Carson to his absolute limits. So grab your popcorn, because we're counting down the 9 most unhinged guests who proved that even the great Johnny Carson couldn't tame everyone who sat in that famous chair.
Number 1. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the bodybuilder who made America blush. Let's kick things off with a moment so shocking, so unexpectedly explicit, that it literally changed what NBC allowed on television. It's 1979, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is not yet the action star or political figure we know today. He's a rising bodybuilder promoting a documentary called Pumping Iron, and he's about to give an answer that will make Johnny Carson wish he'd called in sick that night. Now, Carson was no stranger to innuendo. The man had mastered the art of the wink and the double entendre. But Arnold? Arnold was about to take things to a whole new level. The interview starts innocently enough. Carson's asking about training, about competition, about what drives someone to pursue bodybuilding at such an elite level. Standard sports interview stuff. Then Johnny asks what seems like a harmless question. What does the pump feel like? For those who don't know, the pump is a term in bodybuilding that refers to the sensation of blood rushing to your muscles during an intense workout. It's a physiological response. Nothing controversial about it, right? Wrong. Arnold leans forward with absolute confidence and delivers a response that nobody, not Carson, not the producers, not the studio audience, and definitely not the millions watching at home, saw coming. He compares the sensation of pumping muscles to the most intimate act imaginable, using language so explicit that you'd think he was describing a scene from an adult film rather than a gym workout. And he doesn't stop with one comparison. He keeps going and going, describing sensations, using terminology, painting pictures that absolutely nobody asked for on network television in 1979. Let me put this in perspective. This was an era when married couples on TV sitcoms still slept in separate beds. The word pregnant had only recently been allowed on broadcast television. And here's Arnold Schwarzenegger in his thick Austrian accent essentially describing a full-body climax while Johnny Carson's face goes through every shade of pale. The studio audience falls into shocked silence. You could hear a pin drop. Carson's expression transforms from polite interest to absolute panic in about 3 seconds flat. His hand goes to his tie, and if you know Carson, you know that's his tell. That's the signal that he's genuinely uncomfortable and scrambling for a way out. "Well, I certainly wouldn't know about that," Carson finally manages to stammer, trying desperately to redirect the conversation. But Arnold's on a roll. He continues describing his physique in increasingly sexualized terms, completely oblivious to the fact that he's just committed what might be the biggest broadcast standards violation in Tonight Show history. Behind the scenes, absolute chaos erupts. Producers are frantically calling the control booth. Network executives are lighting up phone lines, demanding to know what the hell just happened. The show's writers are scribbling emergency backup questions, trying to give Carson an exit strategy. But here's the thing that makes this moment truly legendary. Arnold genuinely has no idea he's done anything wrong. He's not trying to be provocative, he's not playing to the cameras, he honestly believes he's just answered a straightforward question about bodybuilding with enthusiasm and honesty. Carson, being the consummate professional he is, eventually manages to wrestle the conversation back to safer territory. He pivots to talk about Arnold's competitive achievements, his training philosophy, anything that doesn't involve comparing muscles to intimate encounters. When the segment finally, mercifully ends, Carson turns to Ed McMahon during the commercial break and delivers what has become an iconic Tonight Show backstage quote. "I think we just got pumped in a way the FCC isn't going to appreciate." The aftermath? Arnold doesn't appear on The Tonight Show again for several years. When he does return in the mid-'80s, he's a rising movie star with a team of handlers who've clearly drilled into him what is and isn't acceptable for American television. The Austrian oak had learned its lesson. But that first appearance, that moment of pure, unfiltered Arnold, it remains one of the most jaw-dropping interviews in Tonight Show history. A reminder of an era when celebrities could still genuinely shock a seasoned host and an entire nation in one brutally honest answer.
Number 2. Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise, when friendship destroyed a $500 suit. If there's one thing Johnny Carson valued above almost everything else, it was professionalism. Show up prepared, respect the format, and keep the chaos contained. Simple rules, right? Well, nobody told Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise that memo. Or maybe they did, and these two just decided that destroying Carson's set would make for better television. It's 1974, and Reynolds is one of Hollywood's biggest sex symbols. Charming, quick-witted, and a Tonight Show regular whom Carson genuinely enjoyed having on. DeLuise is a brilliant physical comedian known for his infectious energy and his complete inability to sit still. Put them together, you've got a recipe for disaster. The segment starts innocently. DeLuise has brought a can of whipped cream, supposedly to demonstrate some cooking technique he's famous for. Carson, who's interviewed thousands of celebrities, immediately senses trouble. You can see it in his eyes, that knowing look that says, "I've made a terrible mistake booking both of these guys together." And then it happens. Without warning, without permission, without any regard for the immaculate Tonight Show set, DeLuise aims the whipped cream can at Reynolds and pulls the trigger. Reynolds, who never backs down from anything, retaliates immediately by grabbing Carson's water pitcher and dumping the entire contents down DeLuise's pants. The audience goes absolutely wild. This isn't planned comedy. This isn't a rehearsed bit. This is genuine chaos unfolding in real time on America's most prestigious talk show. But it gets worse, much worse. Reynolds, caught up in the moment, grabs the whipped cream can and makes a decision that crosses a line that had never been crossed before on The Tonight Show. He turns the can toward Johnny Carson himself and sprays a perfect line of cream directly across the host's pristine, expensive suit. Carson's face goes through a fascinating transformation. The smile stays in place. He's too professional for that smile to ever completely disappear. But if you look at his eyes, if you watch the set of his jaw, you can see he's absolutely furious. "That's a $500 suit," he says, and there's an edge to his voice that regular viewers recognize immediately. That's not fun, Carson. That's "you're paying for this, Carson." The set has descended into complete anarchy. The famous Tonight Show carpet, which has hosted presidents, movie stars, and rock legends, is now soaked with water and covered in whipped cream.
Carson's desk is dripping, his suit is ruined, and he still has 3 more guests scheduled to appear on this very set tonight. Behind the scenes, producers are losing their minds. The commercial break that would normally last exactly 2 minutes has to be extended. The network has to scramble to fill time because the cleanup is so extensive. The next guests are going to have to navigate what looks like the aftermath of a food fight in a kindergarten classroom. When cameras come back after the break, Carson has changed jackets. He's trying to maintain his composure and get the show back on track, but you can see the stains everywhere. The carpet, the furniture, and even parts of the curtain have taken collateral damage. What makes this incident particularly remarkable is that it represents one of the very few times Johnny Carson temporarily lost control of his own show. He built his entire career on maintaining that control, on being the calm center of whatever storm was swirling around him. But Reynolds and DeLuise, they didn't just push the boundaries, they obliterated them. The aftermath is almost as entertaining as the incident itself. Reynolds, knowing he'd gone too far, sends Carson a brand new suit as an apology. DeLuise reportedly sends industrial-strength carpet cleaner to the studio. And Carson, he references the incident in his monologue the next night with characteristic wit, but makes it very clear Reynolds and DeLuise are never, ever appearing together on his show again. They were each welcomed back individually, but together, that combination was just too dangerous for The Tonight Show to risk again.
Number 3. Zsa Zsa Gabor, the socialite with zero filter. If you thought Arnold Schwarzenegger's sexual frankness was shocking, hold on to your seats because Zsa Zsa Gabor took too much information to an entirely different stratosphere. Zsa Zsa Gabor was Tonight Show royalty. She'd appeared over 100 times, always bringing glamour, outrageous stories about her multiple marriages, and that distinctive Hungarian accent that made everything sound either more sophisticated or more scandalous, depending on your perspective. But in 1979, Zsa Zsa decided that simply telling stories wasn't enough. She decided to bring visual aids. The interview starts normally. Zsa Zsa sweeps onto the stage in furs and jewels, calling Carson "darling" in that accent that's impossible to imitate, settling in for what everyone expects will be her usual tales of luxury, romance, and divorce settlements. Carson asks about her recent vacation to the French Riviera, a simple question, a safe question, or so he thinks. That's when Zsa Zsa reaches into her purse and pulls out a gold bikini so small, so revealing, that it barely qualifies as clothing at all. She holds it up for the cameras with absolute pride, announcing that this is what she was wearing when she met one of her husbands on the beach. Carson's water glass becomes his security blanket. He takes a long drink, clearly stalling for time, trying to figure out how to handle this unexpected turn of events. But Zsa Zsa isn't done, not even close. She launches into an extremely detailed account of the romantic encounter that followed, describing how her future husband couldn't resist her in this particular swimwear. And when I say detailed, I mean she's painting a picture that would make a romance novelist blush. She's dropping names, sharing locations, and revealing information that several married men probably would have preferred to keep private. Carson tries, he really tries, to redirect the conversation, but controlling Zsa Zsa Gabor is like trying to redirect a hurricane. She's got momentum, she's got stories, and she's got absolutely zero filter between her brain and her mouth. Then comes the moment that cements this interview in Tonight Show legend. Zsa Zsa insists that Carson hold the bikini top against his chest for the cameras. You can see the internal conflict playing out on Carson's face. He's the host. He's supposed to go along with guests' bits to some degree. But this feels like he's being implicated in her scandalous tales just by touching the garment. He complies, using just his thumb and forefinger, holding the tiny piece of fabric like it might explode. The audience is howling. The network censor is having a coronary. And Zsa Zsa? She's absolutely delighted with the chaos she's creating. What made Zsa Zsa such a uniquely challenging guest was her complete immunity to embarrassment. Most celebrities, even the wild ones, have some sense of boundaries. They know when they're pushing limits.
Zsa Zsa? She genuinely didn't understand why anyone would be shocked by her stories. In her mind, she was simply sharing entertaining anecdotes about her fabulous life. The fallout continues after the show. Several of the men she mentioned in her stories apparently called NBC, furious about being named on national television. Carson's response becomes his standard line. "Gentlemen, I have as much control over Zsa Zsa Gabor as I do over natural disasters." And really, that sums it up perfectly. Zsa Zsa wasn't unhinged in the traditional sense. She wasn't drunk or angry or unstable. She was simply operating on a completely different frequency than everyone else, in a universe where privacy and discretion were concepts that applied to other, less interesting people. Carson survived the interview, but barely. When it finally ended, he looked like a man who just weathered a particularly intense storm and lived to tell the tale.
Number 4. Redd Foxx, the walkout heard round the world. In all of Johnny Carson's years hosting The Tonight Show, guests might have been difficult, they might have been unpredictable, but they didn't just walk out mid-interview. Until Redd Foxx. It's 1975, and Foxx is riding high as the star of Sanford & Son, one of NBC's most successful sitcoms. He's a comedy legend with a groundbreaking career, and Carson respects him immensely. This should be a friendly conversation between two entertainment icons. But before Foxx even makes it to the couch, trouble is brewing. Backstage, a production assistant informs Foxx about NBC's new no-smoking policy on set. Now understand that Redd Foxx is a chain smoker, the kind of guy who's rarely photographed without a cigarette, and he's not happy about this news. His response echoes through the backstage area loud enough that Carson can hear it from the stage. No smoke, no joke. Producers try to smooth things over. They explain it's a network mandate, not personal. But Foxx isn't having it. He's pacing, muttering about respect, about being treated like a professional, about double standards. When Carson introduces him, Foxx walks out, but the audience can immediately sense something's wrong. His handshake with Carson is perfunctory, his body language is rigid, and instead of responding to Johnny's opening question about his hit show, he immediately addresses the smoking ban on live television. "Johnny, they tell me I can't smoke out here," Foxx says flatly. "I've been smoking on television for years. What's the problem now?" Carson, completely blindsided by having an off-camera dispute brought into the open on live TV, tries to smooth things over with humor. He explains it's the network policy, tries to joke about not making the rules himself. But Foxx isn't backing down. "It's about respect," he says, his voice getting harder. "If Dean Martin can drink on his show, why can't I smoke on yours?" The audience, which came for comedy, is now sitting in uncomfortable silence, realizing they're witnessing genuine conflict, not a comedy bit. Carson tries another approach, suggesting they talk about the show and maybe both sneak a cigarette afterward. It's a peace offering, an attempt to move forward. It backfires spectacularly. Foxx stands up. Right there, in the middle of his interview, on live TV, he stands up and straightens his jacket. "No, man, this is wrong. I don't perform where I'm not respected." And then he says it again. "Sorry, Johnny. No smoke, no joke." And he walks off. Just walks off The Tonight Show on live television, leaving Johnny Carson sitting there with a genuinely shocked expression that millions of viewers will never forget. The audience gasps. Ed McMahon looks like he's just witnessed a car accident. And Carson, the man who always has the perfect response, sits in stunned silence for several seconds before finally saying, "Well, Ed, I guess we'll be going to commercial a bit early tonight." Behind the scenes, absolute pandemonium erupts. Producers are scrambling. They have no backup plan because this situation has never happened before. Guests don't walk on Johnny Carson. It's simply not done. When the show returns from the hastily scheduled commercial break, Carson handles it with characteristic grace, making a joke about wondering what happened to Redd Foxx, just like the audience is. But you can tell he's rattled. This is uncharted territory. The aftermath creates significant problems for everyone involved. NBC executives are furious. Fox stars in one of their biggest shows, and he just embarrassed their flagship program.
Carson himself is reportedly more angry about the violation of professional standards than about the disagreement itself. It takes years before Foxx is invited back, and when he finally returns, the relationship between him and Carson is noticeably cooler. The incident became legendary as one of the only times a guest simply walked out, creating one of the most awkward moments in late-night television history and proving that even Johnny Carson's legendary professionalism couldn't prevent every disaster.
Number 5. Truman Capote, when genius collides with tragedy. Not all unhinged guest moments on The Tonight Show came from anger or inappropriate behavior. Some came from watching genius crumble in real time, and a few moments were more painful than Truman Capote's tragic 1975 appearance. In his earlier appearances during the 1960s, Capote had been brilliant, witty, articulate, fascinating, the kind of guest who made everyone watching feel smarter just by listening to him discuss literature and society. Carson clearly admired him, and audiences loved watching these two very different personalities engage in intelligent conversation. But by 1975, Capote's well-documented struggles with alcohol and prescription drugs had taken a devastating toll. Everyone in Hollywood knew he was in trouble, yet Carson, perhaps out of loyalty or hope that his old friend might rally, invited him back anyway. What happened next was uncomfortable television that crossed the line from entertainment into something much darker. From the moment Capote walked onto the set, something was clearly, seriously wrong. His movements were unsteady, his eyes were unfocused, glassy in a way that had nothing to do with the studio lights. He needed help reaching his chair, and when he finally sat down, he seemed to forget where he was for a moment. Carson's expression when greeting him registers shock before quickly being replaced by professional composure, but anyone watching closely could see the concern in his eyes. The interview begins with a simple question about Capote writing. What follows is several minutes of rambling that barely makes sense. He references people who aren't there, events that never happened, and at one point appears to lose awareness that he's on television at all. He mumbles about the beautiful people who betrayed me, apparently referencing his controversial, unfinished novel that had scandalized New York society. His words slur together. He dabs at his forehead with a handkerchief, smearing his makeup. The audience's reaction shifts from initial nervous laughter to profound discomfort as it becomes increasingly clear they're not watching an eccentric genius, they're watching someone in crisis. Carson tries desperately to help, throwing out easier questions, attempting to give Capote something to hold on to conversationally, but nothing works. The writer continues to drift, disconnected from reality in a way that's heartbreaking to watch. The most disturbing moment comes when Carson asks about Capote's friendship with Perry Smith, one of the convicted murderers from In Cold Blood. Capote's eyes well with tears, and he speaks about Smith in the present tense, apparently forgetting that Smith was executed a decade earlier. "Perry understands me," Capote says, voice cracking. "He's the only one who doesn't want something from me." At this point, Carson makes the compassionate decision to end the segment early. He signals for a commercial break, and as the cameras cut away, he leans toward Capote with genuine concern, placing a steadying hand on his arm. When the show returns from commercial, Capote has been quietly escorted off set. Carson smoothly transitions to his next guest without mentioning the writer's absence, a masterclass in protecting someone's dignity. Behind the scenes, Carson personally ensures that Capote isn't left alone. He arranges for someone to stay with the clearly impaired writer at his hotel. Throughout the night, he keeps asking the staff to check on him. What makes this moment particularly significant is how Carson handled it. He could have exploited it for ratings. He could have let the train wreck continue. Instead, he recognized human frailty and responded with compassion. He never mocked the interview afterward. He never included it in highlight reels. Years later, when asked about difficult guests, he would only reference it obliquely. "Sometimes people aren't at their best when they come on the show. When that happens, my job isn't to exploit it, but to get everyone through it with as much grace as possible." The Capote appearance remains a sobering reminder of how the pressures of fame, combined with personal demons, can lead to public unraveling,
and how a truly professional host responds with humanity rather than exploitation when faced with someone in genuine crisis. Number 6. Madonna, the material girl who shocked the unshockable. By 1987, Madonna had already established herself as pop culture's premier boundary pusher. She'd courted controversy, challenged conventions, and built an empire on being provocative. But even Carson, who'd interviewed countless celebrities over decades, seemed unprepared for just how far Madonna was willing to go on his stage. From the moment she walks on wearing a black lace outfit that barely meets broadcast standards, it's clear Madonna has zero intention of delivering a standard promotional interview. This is going to be a performance, a power play, a deliberate attempt to make Johnny Carson uncomfortable on his own show. And it works. Instead of taking her seat at a respectful distance like every other guest, Madonna positions herself unusually close to Carson, invading his carefully maintained personal space. Carson was famous for controlling every aspect of his interviews, including the physical dynamics. Madonna completely ignores these unwritten rules. The conversation quickly moves from merely flirtatious to overtly sexual. When Carson asks about her upcoming film Who's That Girl?, Madonna doesn't launch into standard promotional talking points. Instead, she describes a scene that was cut for being too risque, using language that has network censors reaching for the delay button. But the real moment comes when Madonna leans in even closer and suggests, on live television in front of millions of viewers, that she could show Carson exactly what got cut if he wants to come back to her hotel later. The delivery is deliberate, provocative, and completely unprecedented for The Tonight Show. The audience erupts in a mixture of shocked gasps and titillated laughter. Carson, rarely thrown off balance by anyone, tugs at his tie in that telltale gesture of genuine discomfort. Madonna knows exactly what she's doing. This isn't just a young star being naive or inappropriate. This is a calculated power move by someone who understands that making Johnny Carson uncomfortable on his own show will generate more publicity than any standard interview ever could. As the conversation continues, the situation escalates. Madonna's comments are so explicit that the network censor has to activate the delay button, resulting in a brief silence that alerts everyone watching at home that something inappropriate has been said. And then it happens 3 more times in a single interview. Behind the scenes, the control booth is in complete panic. The censor is frantically hitting buttons. Producers are debating whether to cut to an emergency commercial break, something rarely done on The Tonight Show. Carson, drawing on decades of experience, attempts to reassert control with humor. "I'm starting to think I should have booked Mother Teresa instead of the material girl tonight," he quips, earning appreciative laughter. But Madonna's not done. She places her hand on Carson's knee, crossing one of television's unspoken boundaries about physical contact between host and guest, and delivers another suggestive line that pushes Carson's discomfort to visible levels. Ed McMahon, sensing his longtime colleague's unease, jumps in with a hearty laugh and a deflecting comment, giving Carson a moment to recover. Eventually, Carson manages to steer the conversation towards safer territory for the rest of the segment, but the tension never fully dissipates. Madonna continues making suggestive comments and maintaining her physically intimate positioning until the very end. When the interview finally concludes, Carson's relief is obvious. As the show cuts to a commercial, cameras catch him wiping his brow in an uncharacteristic display of stress. In the aftermath, network executives reportedly requested that Madonna not be booked again during Carson's tenure. While never publicly commenting on the appearance, Carson is overheard telling a producer, "Next time, let's stick with guests who understand the difference between The Tonight Show and an Amsterdam red light district." Madonna's appearance represents a unique moment in Tonight Show history, not a guest losing control, but a guest deliberately seizing control, turning the interview into her own performance piece, regardless of the host's comfort level or the show's standards.
Number 7. Don Rickles, the comic who hijacked the show.
Don Rickles and Johnny Carson had one of late-night television's greatest friendships. Their mock insult comedy created television gold. But in 1976, Rickles took their relationship to completely unprecedented territory by literally hijacking The Tonight Show in the middle of someone else's interview. The evening starts normally. Carson is mid-conversation with actor Robert Blake discussing his hit series Beretta, when suddenly there's commotion from backstage. Without warning, without invitation, without any announcement whatsoever, Don Rickles bursts through the curtains, completely uninvited and unscheduled. "Johnny! Johnny!" Rickles bellows as he charges onto the set, still wearing makeup from doing the Dinah Shore show next door. "I heard you were saying terrible things about me." Carson's face registers genuine shock. This isn't a planned bit. This isn't rehearsed. You can see him glance off stage toward his producer with a "what is happening" expression before quickly composing himself. "Ladies and gentlemen, apparently Don Rickles has escaped from his handlers," Carson ad-libs smoothly, trying to maintain control. But Rickles is just getting started. Instead of making a brief comedic appearance and leaving, he pulls up a chair and physically inserts himself into Blake's interview. Robert Blake, who's supposed to be the actual guest, looks increasingly bemused as Rickles completely takes over. "Don't mind me, Bobby," Rickles announces. "You keep talking about your silly little cop show. I'll just sit here and make sure the audience stays awake." What follows is 20 minutes of pure, unscripted chaos. Rickles doesn't just participate in the interview, he dominates it, interrupting both Carson and Blake repeatedly, making jokes at everyone's expense, and treating The Tonight Show like his own personal stage. Then, Rickles does something unthinkable. He walks behind Carson's desk, territory that's traditionally sacred, off-limits to guests. He starts rifling through Carson's drawers on live television. "These are private," Carson protests, half amused, half alarmed, trying to close a drawer as Rickles pulls out personal items. "Private? On television?" Rickles shoots back, holding up a comb and a small mirror. "Look at this, folks. The great Johnny Carson is as vain as a peacock." The crew is horrified. Carson's desk, his personal space, is being violated on live TV. But here's where Carson's genius as a host shows. He recognizes that fighting this situation will only create awkward television, so he makes a professional decision to surrender temporarily to the chaos. He leans back, lights a cigarette, still permitted in that era, and lets Rickles run wild. Rickles continues his rampage, touching props, examining set pieces, and at one point actually breaking the rabbit ears on a decorative television prop behind Carson's desk. "That's coming out of your paycheck," Carson warns, only half joking. "Bill it to NBC," Rickles fires back. "They can afford it. Look at this cheap set." Meanwhile, poor Robert Blake, the actual scheduled guest, barely manages to complete a single thought about his TV show during the entire segment. He's essentially become a spectator to the Don Rickles show, broadcast live from The Tonight Show stage. This all occurs during the era of live broadcasting, with no ability to edit or control what viewers are witnessing. In the control booth, producers are losing their minds. Network executives are calling, demanding to know what's happening. But Carson, recognizing that the unpredictability is exactly what makes great television, even if it means his carefully planned show is being demolished in real time, makes the professional choice to let it play out. After nearly 20 minutes of Rickles' uninvited appearance, Carson finally manages to steer the segment to a commercial break. When cameras return, Rickles has been persuaded to leave, though not before extracting a promise from Carson to visit his upcoming Las Vegas show. The incident becomes one of the most talked about moments in Tonight Show history. Viewers call NBC the next day, not to complain, but to praise the unscripted hilarity. Carson references it in his monologue the following evening. "We've increased security around the studio tonight. Don Rickles has been added to the FBI's most wanted list." The Rickles invasion demonstrated something crucial about that era of television. Live, unpredictable moments possessed an electricity that many feel is missing from today's more tightly controlled talk show environment. It also showcased Carson's greatest strength,
knowing when to let go of control and let the magic happen.
Number 8. Shelley Winters, the actress who exploded. Two-time Academy Award winner Shelley Winters was known throughout Hollywood for her volcanic temper and unfiltered opinions. But even by her standards, her 1975 Tonight Show appearance created one of the most uncomfortable confrontations in talk show history. The trouble begins when Carson first interviews Truman Capote, who's promoting his controversial novel, Answered Prayers. The book's thinly veiled portrayals of New York society figures had scandalized the city's elite. When Winters joins the conversation, taking the seat next to Capote, Carson attempts a light-hearted transition, asking if she's read Capote's work. What Carson doesn't know, what nobody knows, is that Winters has not only read it, she's recognized herself in one of Capote's thinly disguised characters, and she's furious. "I've read enough to know slander when I see it," Winters responds immediately, her voice rising. "Some people think they can hide behind so-called fiction to say cruel things about real people." Capote, either not realizing Winters is referring to his work or choosing to play naive, smiles placidly. "Well, darling, fiction is always better than truth, isn't it?" This seemingly innocent response triggers an explosion that leaves everyone stunned. Winters turns fully toward Capote, her face flushing red with anger. "How dare you?" she shouts loud enough that the audio equipment peaks. "You come into people's homes, you eat their food, you act like a friend, and then you go write terrible lies about them." Carson, realizing the situation is deteriorating rapidly, attempts to intervene. "Shelley, I don't think," but Winters is unstoppable. She continues her tirade, ignoring Carson completely, focusing all her fury on Capote. "You think you're so clever with your little stories and your little hints, but everyone knows exactly who you're talking about. You betrayed people who treated you like family." The studio audience, initially unsure whether this is genuine anger or a theatrical performance, grows uncomfortably quiet as it becomes clear this is a real confrontation. Carson, trapped between his two guests, displays what crew members describe as his emergency calm, the composed demeanor he adopts during genuinely difficult situations. When Capote finally manages to respond, he only makes things worse. "Darling, if you're upset about a character in my stories, perhaps the similarity says more about you than about my writing." It's fuel on Winters' already considerable fire. She launches into a personal attack that goes beyond his writing to include brutal comments about his appearance, his voice, his lifestyle, much of it too personal and crude for 1970s network television standards. Carson, realizing the situation is deteriorating rapidly, makes the rare decision to cut to an unscheduled commercial break. Before cameras cut away, viewers can see him physically positioning himself between the two guests, literally inserting himself into what's become a dangerously heated confrontation. During the break, chaos continues. Winters keeps screaming at Capote. Producers frantically rearrange the seating, creating maximum distance between the warring parties. Carson has to physically separate them, something he's never had to do before or since. When the broadcast resumes, Carson demonstrates exactly why he's considered the master of talk show hosting. He carefully directs questions to each guest individually, smoothly interrupting whenever Winters shows signs of launching another attack. His body language creates a subtle but effective barrier between the hostile parties. When the segment finally ends, Carson's relief is palpable. "We'll be right back after this," he tells viewers, adding under his breath but still audible, if I'm lucky, with completely different guests. The Winters-Capote confrontation becomes legendary in Tonight Show history, an example of how quickly controlled television can descend into chaos, and how Carson's skills extended far beyond comedy and interviews to include genuine crisis management.
Number 9. Oliver Reed. When Dr. Drunk Meets Live Television.
British actor Oliver Reed was already famous for outrageous alcohol-fueled behavior when he arrived at NBC Studios for his 1975 Tonight Show appearance. But what transpired that night created one of the most alarming moments in the show's history. From the moment Reed enters the green room, production staff can tell something's wrong. He's already heavily intoxicated, slurring his words, and when offered water or coffee, he responds with, "Scorch or nothing, love." Producers face a difficult decision: cancel a scheduled guest at the last minute or hope Carson can manage the situation. They warn Johnny about Reed's condition. Carson, confident in his ability to handle any interview, assures them he's got this under control. He doesn't. When Reed is introduced and stumbles onto the set, the audience's initial laughter quickly dies as they realize this isn't a comedy bit. This is a genuinely intoxicated performer. Reed collapses into the guest chair, sprawling in a manner that violates every convention of Tonight Show decorum. Carson opens with a standard question about Reed's latest film. What follows is a rambling, nearly incomprehensible response that veers wildly from the movie to childhood stories to an extended anecdote about a bar fight in Malta that has nothing to do with anything. Reed's words are so slurred that NBC's closed captioning department struggles to transcribe his speech. Carson attempts repeatedly to guide Reed back to the appropriate territory, but the actor seems physically incapable of focusing on any single topic for more than a few seconds. The interview takes an even more disturbing turn when Reed begins making increasingly sexual comments, first about actresses he's worked with, then bizarrely directing innuendo toward Carson himself. The audience's uncomfortable laughter signals their recognition that boundaries are being crossed. Then comes the crisis moment. Approximately 7 minutes into the segment, Reed attempts to demonstrate a stunt from one of his films. He tries to stand up and nearly topples over, grabbing Carson's desk for support and knocking over the host's famous coffee mug in the process. Water spills across Carson's notes and suit. For just an instant, Carson's professional facade breaks, revealing genuine alarm before he quickly recovers. "I think the desk is supposed to stay where it is, Oliver," he quips, using humor to mask what's become a genuinely concerning situation. Behind the scenes, producers frantically signal Carson to wrap up the segment, something almost unheard of for a first-time guest. The control booth erupts in panic mode. There's serious discussion about cutting to a commercial mid-interview, which goes against every Carson policy unless there's a true emergency. Carson, recognizing the segment can't be salvaged, decides to end the interview early with a smoothness that disguises how unprecedented this is. He thanks Reed and suggests they continue another time when we have more opportunity to really dig into your remarkable career. As the show cuts to commercial, cameras catch Reed appearing confused about the abrupt conclusion, while Carson quickly moves away, signaling production assistants, who immediately appear to escort Reed off-set. The aftermath creates significant tension. Network executives are furious about the near disaster on their flagship program. Carson himself, though publicly gracious, is reportedly unusually irritated, not by Reed's desire to drink, but by his willingness to appear on television in such an impaired state. Reed is never invited back during Carson's tenure. When asked about the appearance years later, Carson demonstrates his characteristic tact. Oliver Reed is a tremendously talented actor who was having, let's just say, an enthusiastic evening when he visited us. The incident becomes a cautionary tale about the risks of booking unpredictable guests on live broadcasts and highlights Carson's extraordinary professionalism, his ability to protect both his show and his inebriated guest from complete on-air meltdown.
So there you have it, 9 of the most unhinged, outrageous, and downright insane moments from Johnny Carson's legendary Tonight Show tenure. What's fascinating about these incidents is what they reveal not just about the guests, but about Carson himself.
In an era before everything was micromanaged, before publicists controlled every word, before celebrities were media-trained within an inch of their lives, Carson had to navigate genuine chaos in real time, and he did it brilliantly. Think about it. He handled Arnold Schwarzenegger's shocking sexual confession with humor. He survived Madonna's aggressive flirtation with his dignity intact. He protected Truman Capote from a complete public breakdown with compassion. He let Don Rickles destroy his set because he knew it made great television. And through it all, he maintained the professionalism that made him the gold standard of late-night hosting. These weren't just uncomfortable moments, they were masterclasses in how to handle the unexpected. Carson could have exploited these situations for easy ratings. He could have mocked his guests afterward. Instead, he treated each incident with exactly the right combination of humor, grace, and professionalism. That's what separates Carson from virtually every talk show host who came after him. He understood that his job wasn't just to entertain, it was to protect his guests, serve his audience, and maintain the dignity of his show, even when chaos erupted around him. In today's world of carefully scripted interviews, pre-approved questions, and publicists hovering off camera, moments like these simply don't happen anymore. Every appearance is controlled, every answer is rehearsed, every controversy is managed. But back in Carson's day, anything could happen. And when it did, you had the best in the business navigating those treacherous waters with skill that nobody's matched since. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Johnny Carson's most unhinged guest moments, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're building the ultimate community of classic television fans, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Drop a comment below telling us which of these moments shocked you the most. Was it Arnold's pump confession, Madonna's aggressive flirtation, or maybe Redd Foxx's legendary walkout? I want to know which one left you absolutely speechless. And here's your homework. Share this video with anyone who thinks modern talk shows are unpredictable. Show them what real, unscripted television chaos looked like back when Johnny Carson ruled late night. Before you go, check out our video on the most controversial Saturday Night Live sketches that almost got banned. It's got the same energy as these Carson moments, but from Studio 8H. Thanks for watching, and remember, they just don't make television like this anymore. And honestly, maybe that's both a blessing and a curse. I'll see you in the next one.